Paddle to the Sea, chapters 10, 11, and 12. Chapter 10, Life in a Northern Marsh. The marsh was alive. Dragonflies and butterflies danced in the sun. Turtles lay in rows like buttons on old logs, and frogs, frightened by stalking herons, leaped in all directions. The downy babies of wild ducks pecked eagerly at bugs. Woodpeckers, kingfishers, and ruffled grouse made their busy noises. A cow moose with her calf splashed in the lagoon to drive off flies. Near Paddle, a bull moose, now growing new antlers, was feeding on the roots and stems of water lilies. With his head far underwater, he jerked the lily pads from under Paddle's canoe and set him free to be pushed about on the pond by the wind. Days passed. When it was sunny, squirrels chattered in the pines and chipmunks scolded from high rocks. But they were silent, and the ducks moved to safety on the day that a mother bear and her twins came to romp in the water. The cubs caught crayfish and frogs in the mud, while the mother bear squatted on a rock beside a deep pool in the lagoon and smacked a black bass to the bank with her paw. After this picnic, all three ripped open rotten stumps for grubs and beetles. Paddle might have been caught in the marsh for life, but one evening no stars came out. Thunder crashed and lightning split the night with fire. A wet owl flapped madly for shelter in the forest. Ducks squawked and gathered their babies under mossy banks. A water-soaked muskrat waddled wetly into a hollow log and sat down with a very sour look. The rain made a thick curtain. The pond rose inch by inch. Part of the sandy mound along the brook gave way. Torn lily plants, loose wood, and islands of watercress raced out to Lake Superior. Paddle was again on his way to the sea. Chapter 11. Paddle finds one end of Lake Superior. Paddle traveled steadily westward along the north shore of Lake Superior. Sometimes lake currents pushed him forward a mile every hour. Other times, when breeze pulled him backwards off his course, it took 5 hours to travel a mile. This was a wilderness shore. But Paddle was never alone. He had for company the gulls who nested on the rocky islands and flew up like clouds of smoke from the rocks. Indians paddled canoes among the bay, and fishermen lived along the shore in shacks and spread out their nets to dry. Sometimes town-like toy blocks broke the line of dark pines that was the mainland, or rivers running from hidden lakes in the forest, cut through the cliffs and waterfalls like giant stairs of silver. At night, loons called mournfully from the water, and wolves howled back from the land. 2 months after leaving the marsh, Paddle reached the western and very narrow end of Lake Superior, where bridges crossed from shore to shore. He had come to Duluth, Minnesota, a city on the hill. Later, he drifted over a wide river to Superior, Wisconsin, on a flat plain. At these ports, many ships were loading barrels of butter, crates of eggs, and boxes of vegetables. Others were piled high with lumber for distant cities. But most of the ships at the docks were unloading coal from Indiana and Ohio and reloading iron ore. Paddle bumped against the piling of the long dock. High above him, a train was dumping the ore down pipes into a ship's hold. The train had brought this ore that stained everything red from the largest iron mine in the world, for which this region is famous. Paddle floated beneath one of the docks in brick red water. Red dust shifted down on him. Chapter 12. A Fish Story. Best catch in weeks, one man was saying. And that's not all. Look, we've even netted red engines in canoes. Paddle, stained red with iron ore, had traveled eastward from Superior for a week. Now he had reached the Apostle Islands, one of the best fishing regions of Lake Superior, and been caught in one of those fishermen's net. Wooden floats held the upper edges of these nets on the surface. Lead weights pulled the lower edges downward like a fence in the water. 2 men in a motorboat had hauled him in. Large fish, 3 times larger than his canoe, flopped about him. There were so many that they filled big boxes and overflowed onto the boat until the men worked knee-deep in lake trout and whitefish. The men paused only for a moment to look at Paddle. When all the net was aboard, the boat sped for an island and tied up at a wobbly dock. 3 more men and their wives, 5 dogs, and 2 cats came down to help. The fish were cleaned on the dock. A messy business, but the dogs and the cats liked it, and they greedy gulls who ate the refuse thrown into the water. Everyone hurried to get the fresh fish packed on cracked ice and stored in a shed. When the last fish was packed, one of the fishermen looked around. "What's that other fish we caught?" he asked. "That canoe." But Paddle could not be found. In the excitement, he had slipped through a hole in the dock and into the water. The men took the nets from the boat, stretched them on big reeds to dry and to be mended. They loaded fresh nets aboard and then roared away to set them for a new catch. A large boat came to take the fish stored in the shed to the mainland for shipments to faraway markets. Paddle was forgotten. Here's a map of Lake Superior, and Paddle started up here and he's down here, and now he's down over here in the Apostle Islands. Long way to go to the sea yet. Paddle to the sea.